Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple take on Kobe Brea, Jackson Robinson, and Mark Pope's new look Kentucky Wildcats as part of the Champions Classic in what could be the best non-conference game of the college basketball season.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host for today's show, Andy Patton, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, here on all audio platforms. You can find us on YouTube as well. I want to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel, and remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, Ace Bailey did not make his season debut for Rutgers on Monday. They nearly fell to St. Peter's. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how our poll, the Locked On College Basketball Top 25, differs from the AP poll after that was released on Monday. But first, we are going to preview the two monster games on Tuesday tonight. For those of you ready to watch these games, we got the two games in the Champions Classic in Atlanta on ESPN, Michigan State versus number 1 Kansas, and Duke versus number 19 Kentucky. We'll take them in chronological order, starting with Tom Izzo and the Spartans taking on the number 1 ranked Kansas Jayhawks, Bill Self's team. This game will be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. FanDuel currently has the Jayhawks as 6.5-point favorites. The key matchup, the key element of this game is it's the number 6 ranked offense in the country, according to Ken Palm's adjusted offensive efficiency. That would be Kansas, taking on the number 10 ranked defense in Michigan State. Kansas's offense versus Michigan State's defense. That's going to be the catalyst in this game. We've talked about Kansas quite a bit on the show. They're 2-0 on the season. They got a 30-point win on opening day over Howard, and then a 3-point win against North Carolina at the Fog. It was a game Kansas was up 20 at points in this one. It looked like they were going to breeze their way to a victory, really establish themselves as the clear-cut, unquestionable number 1 team in the country. And then a big shout out to Hubert Davis's Tar Heels. They fought and clawed their way all the way back into this game, ended up having a lead with about 3 minutes to go. Again, on the road at Fog Allen Fieldhouse to have a lead with 3 minutes to go. Not a lot of teams are even in that position against Kansas, and yet North Carolina still unable to secure the victory. Kansas managed to kind of withstand the lumps, get punched in the mouth, fight back. Hunter Dickinson was strong down the stretch, and Kansas ends up getting a 3-point victory in that one. The big storyline with Kansas this season is basically that Bill Self, he meant it last year when he said, I've been thinking about next season for like the last month of the season. The injuries that they had with Kevin McCullar, and they had injuries to Marco Jackson throughout the year. They had some other injuries that just really put them in a position to not compete down the stretch of the season. They limped into the NCAA tournament. They got smashed by Gonzaga in the round of 32. And Bill Self said, well, I'm looking towards next year already. And he went out and built a team that can withstand those kinds of potential injury issues. They go out and get a Diggy Coit. They go out and get a Zeke Mayo, a Ryland Griffin, an AJ Storr. They add freshman Flory Badinga and Rakis Passmore. And now they have the kind of depth where when one of your starters is not playing well, you can rely on somebody else to come contribute for you. Zeke Mayo and AJ Storr coming off the bench to start the season. And they've been fantastic in those roles. Both of them have been more effective than starter Diggy Coit, which people were a little surprised to see Coit in the starting lineup. He's averaging just 4 points and 3.5 assists in those first 2 games on the season. Meanwhile, we've seen far more production from both Mayo and Storr. Storr was a little not great in their first game against Howard, but he was better in that game against North Carolina. I'm curious if we'll see Bill Self make a starting lineup change this early in the season, if they will go with either Mayo or Storr in the starting lineup and bring Coit off the bench, or if he'll continue to go with the lineup that has worked for them up to this point. Also want to give a shout out to Flory Badunga, who's been very, very good as that backup 5 for Hunter Dickinson. Having depth, not just in the guard room and on the wing, but having some depth in the front court is going to be crucial for this team when they get into conference play in particular. Meanwhile, Michigan State 2-0 on the season, 24-point win over Monmouth, who's 263rd at KenPom, 36-point win over Niagara, who is 329th. So not really any competition yet for Tom Izzo's teams. Jaden Akins has been their star, 16.5 points, 7.5 boards through those 2 games. Transfer Frankie Fiddler, who comes over from Omaha. He has looked solid so far. We've also seen what looks like potentially the start of a breakout season for sophomore Cohen Carr. It was a really kind of heralded freshman class for Michigan State last year that didn't really live up to the billing. Xavier Booker hasn't done much yet this year, just 5.5 points, 3.5 boards. Again, it's only 2 games. And a lot of these teams, these guys aren't playing big minutes in these games because they don't have to. Cohen Carr, though, 7.5 points, 4 boards. He's just looked really comfortable in his role. He looks more prepared to take on a kind of what you need to do in Tom Izzo's offense. And I think just watching those games, just seeing kind of the comfort level that he has compared to last year, I think he's primed to have a pretty solid year. Even if the numbers haven't been great so far, again, it's a very, very early sample size. I wouldn't be surprised to see Cohen Carr, who's an incredible athlete, look really good in going forward this season. Spartans shooting 25% as a team from 3. That is an area of concern. The main reason that I'm going to favor Kansas in this one, I think Kansas's offense is good enough against Michigan State's defense. It hasn't really been tested so far this season. I think Tom Izzo is going to keep this thing close. I think a lot of people will look at these 2 teams and think 6.5, that's kind of low. Kansas is a much better team. I think Kansas is a better team, and they're like more than 6 points better than Michigan State, if that makes sense. But I would not be surprised to see Tom Izzo's team find a way to keep this one very close throughout. The nightcap, number 6 Duke Blue Devils taking on the 19th ranked Kentucky Wildcats, 9 p.m. Eastern time. FanDuel line has Duke 6.5 in that one. Duke is 4th and 5th in adjusted offense and adjusted defense at KenPom. Meanwhile, Kentucky is 17th in offense and 56th in defense. That is your outlier. That is the concern for Kentucky in this game. Can their defense do enough to slow down a very versatile offensive attack from Duke? They can beat you on the block. They can beat you from the 3-point line. They can beat you they can beat you at the free throw line. There's a lot of different ways this Duke team can secure wins. And now neither of these teams, both teams are combined 4-0. They haven't played particularly competitive schedules. Duke's 2-0. They beat Maine in their first game. They beat Navy in the second game. Con Knippel has looked fantastic. He looked good in the preseason. He's averaging 18.5 points through those first 2 games. He's 7 of 14 from 3. Cooper Flagg has been as advertised, 15.5 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 steals, and 1.5 blocks. Again, only 2 games, so those stats are you want to take them with a grain of salt this early, especially with their competition level, but been nice to see those 2 freshmen look as advertised so far for John Shire. And the Blue Devils, their veteran guards are playing well as well. Tyrese Proctor has looked good. He is also 7 of 14 from 3 to start the season. Sion James, a transfer from Tulane, has looked good as well, averaging 11.5 points and 2.5 assists through those first 2 games. And you got the 2 forwards, Malik Brown and Mason Gillis, who are filling valuable roles for this Duke team. Kentucky, though, is such a wild card. 2-0 on the season, have scored over 100 points in each game. They played Wright State and Bucknell. Neither team particularly great, and both teams are fine. They're not like 350 teams in the KenPom rankings, but they're not expected to win their league. They're not expected to be in the NCAA tournament, but you score 100 points in back-to-back games. It definitely means something. Kobe Brea has been absolutely electric for Mark Pope's team. 19 points per game, scored 38 through those 2 games. He's 10 of 12 from 3. He was a fantastic shooter at Dayton. I think Dayton underutilized him in that offense, and in a system like Mark Pope's where it's space on the floor, it's a lot of ball movement, it's a lot of shots, it's a lot of 3-point attempts. Brea is going to thrive. He already has. He's obviously not going to shoot 90+% from 3 or 80+% like he is right now, but he could very realistically be this team's leading scorer, be a 15, 18 point per game guy, put himself squarely in the NBA draft conversation. Again, we don't want to overreact to 2 games against bad teams, but this kid looks really good and he's tailor-made for a Mark Pope offense. And I think it's exciting to see what he looks like now facing a good team, a top 5 defense in the country in Duke. Otega Owe has been very good as well for Kentucky. Amari Williams, the Drexel transfer in the front court, is averaging 13 and a half rebounds per game in those first two games. He has outplayed the presumed starting front court of Andrew Carr and Brandon Garrison. Garrison just hasn't done a lot of scoring, but he's looked good otherwise. I think he's going to be fine. He was very good at Oklahoma State last year. But yeah, some of the guys we expected to be the big-time players for Kentucky, again, 2 games, but they haven't really been there yet. Jackson Robinson's been okay. 11 points per game. Kirk Reese has only scored 6 points on the season, but he does have, 19 assists on the year. So he's been really good at distributing the basketball, just not doing a whole lot of scoring. And I think a big part of it is that 10 players for Mark Pope's team are averaging through 2 games between 13 and 23 minutes per game. Everybody's basically playing like 18 to 20 minutes per game. Because when you're beating teams really badly, you can afford to do more substitutions. You don't have to play your starters 30, 32, 35 minutes per game. That's what makes this game so interesting to me, is what does the maybe condensed 8-man lineup look like for Mark Pope? Does he continue to play 10 deep, even in this game against Duke? Does it get brought down to 9 or 8? Which players end up playing 28 minutes or 32 minutes or 35 minutes? Which players go from playing 12 or 13 minutes to 8 or 6 or don't play at all? That's going to give us a much better sense of what this lineup might actually look like getting into conference play. And I think that's one of many key storylines in this game. I'm excited to see Cooper Flagg against Andrew Carr and Brandon Garrison. I'm excited to see the shooting battle between Con Knipple and Kobe Brea. There is a ton of excitement in these 2 matchups. Again, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time is the starting tip on ESPN for Michigan State, Kansas. Duke and Kentucky will be 2.5 hours later, also on ESPN. 2 incredible games. You love the Champions Classic, and it should really deliver this year. Well, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the AP poll and compare it to our Locked On College Basketball poll. Who are the big risers? Who are the big fallers in the AP poll? How does it compare to our composite rankings? We discuss that in just a second. But first, Locked On College Basketball fans, listen up. You need to download the Roy app. You have heard us talk about Roy this season and how they are revolutionizing the NIL industry. Roy allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money. And that's what I love about Roy. You get to decide who gets the money. And if that player transfers, you get your money back. Roy is helping us keep the teams intact, and it's actually good for the game long term. You can show your support by depositing a little appreciation onto that player's account. To do that, download the Roy app, or you can go to joinroy.com. Now let's spotlight the Roy/Locked On Player of the Week. Kansas running back Devin Neal, 116 rushing yards and a pair of touchdowns in the Jayhawks' upset win over Iowa State. Big 12 is a basketball conference, but this was a fun result on the gridiron for a Kansas team that's really struggled this year. So we're going to toss a couple bucks Devin Neal's way. Every contribution counts, whether it's $10, $20, it all adds up, and it's going to help your favorite players stay put. So join me and show some love for Devin on Roy. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com today. Use that promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, change the game. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball podcast, and we are moving away from our preview of the Champions Classic Tuesday evening, a pair of phenomenal basketball games to be taken in, and we're going to talk about the AP poll, the risers, the fallers, who's in, who's out. We're also going to compare that to the Locked On College Basketball composite rankings. For those of you who do not see those, you can follow us on Twitter at LockedOnCBB. We post the rankings there. We also post them on the YouTube community tab. So if you're on YouTube right now, you click on the community tab, you will see the rankings there. You can also join the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel or follow us on Instagram, posted at all those different places. There are composite rankings done by myself, my co-host Isaac Shade, as well as our regular guest Leaf Tulane. All of us do our rankings. We combine them together. That's what we get. So we're going to talk about the differences between our rankings and the AP Top 25. First, here are the 5 teams that rose 2 or more spots between the preseason rankings and the rankings that came out on Monday. You got Gonzaga, who moved up 2 spots from number 6 to number 4. Probably would have moved a little bit farther had they not struggled more than we were expecting them to struggle against Arizona State on Sunday at the Kennel. Auburn was the biggest riser. They went from 11th to 5th. I think there's an argument they should have been even higher than 5th, but the AP voters tend to not be as reactionary as I think perhaps they should be, especially in the modern era where preseason projections are a lot harder to do. And if a team doesn't look very good early on, maybe you shouldn't keep them up as high as you did. But for Auburn, 6 spots from 11 to 5 is still a really nice jump for a team that picked up a huge win over Houston in Houston on Saturday. Marquette moved up 3 spots, 18 to 15. They are playing as I'm recording right now. Looks like they have finally pulled away from Central Michigan and should continue to at least, if not climb, at least stay in that top 20 conversation. Cincinnati moved up from 20 to 17, 2 blowout wins for them, doing the Big 12 thing where they schedule a bunch of crappy opponents in the non-conference. So congrats to Cincinnati for moving up, for beating teams you're expected to beat. Kentucky moves up 4 spots from 23 to 19. I think that's justified. They also played a pair of not very good teams, better teams than Cincinnati's opponents, but 100-plus points in each of those 2 games. We'll obviously learn a lot more about this Kentucky team on Tuesday night when they take on Duke. 5 teams also fell 2 or more spots in the top 25. Iowa State fell 2 spots from 5 to 7. It was more just teams climbing up ahead of them. I wouldn't really be super alarmed about that. As an Iowa State fan, they're also playing, as I'm recording right now, and up 22 points on Kansas City. Houston moved down 4 spots from number 4 to number 8, and Baylor also moved down 4 spots from number 8 to number 12. So 3 of the 5 fallers were in the Big 12. I don't know that there's a whole lot that actually means. Again, I think Iowa State's fall was just more to do with other teams climbing. Houston obviously lost, but they lost to a very good Auburn team, and they're still in the top 10. Baylor didn't fall as far as I thought that they would, from 8 to 12. I don't think that 12 is a particularly egregious spot for them. That Arkansas win obviously helps them quite a bit, as Arkansas remains in the top 25 as well. But I thought Baylor would be more in the like 15 to 20 range. I think I had them 17th or 18th in my rankings, but I'm not particularly thrown off by them being 12th. Arkansas, another faller, they fell from 16 to 18. Not a very big fall for them, but again, their loss was to apparently the 12th best team in the country in Baylor, according to those same AP voters. And then Texas A&M fell 10 spots from 13 to 23. I was a little surprised to see them still in the top 25, but they clearly took the biggest fall after taking a loss this season. The 2 teams that joined the top 25 for the AP poll were Ohio State at 21. They picked up a huge blowout victory over Youngstown State on Monday. And then St. John's, Rick Pitino is back in the top 25. St. John's is there for the first time in a long time. Really nice to see Pitino and the Johnnies back in the mix here. They deserve it. Pair of blowout wins to start the season. The St. John's team is going to be a real problem in the Big East, of course, competing alongside UConn, Marquette, and Creighton, as well as Xavier, who picked up some votes but is in the top 25 right now. But St. John's definitely deserves to be at the bottom half of that top 25. The 2 teams out of the mix are UCLA and Texas. Texas lost to Ohio State. Tremont Mark is out indefinitely for Rodney Terry's team. That's certainly a team that had some depth issues coming into the season and is now missing their starting guard. That is going to be a problem for that team. We'll see how long it takes them to get back into the mix. UCLA just looks like they did last year. Anemic on offense, really struggled. Guys we expected to take a leap this season have not done so yet. New Mexico's a good team, so it's not like that in itself is a terrible loss, but if you watch that game, you know why. They went from being in the top 25 to not getting a single vote from a single AP voter. That didn't happen very often, but that team did not look like a top 25 team. So not too surprised to see that. Quickly, we'll talk about the teams that we are 3 or more spots different in the Locked On College Basketball rankings compared to the AP poll. Alabama is number 2 in the AP poll. We had them at number 5. Picked up a nice win over McNeese on Monday, but it was a little too close for comfort, just like their game against Arkansas State. We'll see what happens when they face a very good Purdue team later this week. UConn, 3rd in the AP poll, 8th in our rankings. We just weren't quite as high on UConn coming into the year. They have not done anything to deserve moving down, but that's where they started the season for us. So they remain in that spot again until they play a better opponent. We'll have a better sense of how this unit is coming together. Cincinnati was 17th in the AP poll. We had them 20th. That's where they were last week. So we just didn't give them that little bump. Florida is 20th. In the AP poll, we have them 16th, a little higher on this Gators program. They picked up a win on Monday as well over Grambling. Obviously got some other stuff going on for Todd Golden and that team right now, but still a quality program on the court. Ohio State 21st in the AP poll, 24th in our poll. Again, that's a pretty minor difference for a team that is still pretty unproven, but looked very good on Monday. Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw both had really strong performances. 3 teams in the AP top 25 that were not ranked by us. It is the last 3 teams in those rankings: Texas A&M at 23, Rutgers at 24, and Ole Miss, Chris Beard's team, at 25. 3 teams ranked in our top 25 that were not ranked by the AP voters: Texas Tech, who we ranked 12th, and yet is not in the top 25 for the AP voters. That'll be rectified soon. Again, haven't played a particularly strong schedule up to this point, but JT Toppin looks excellent. That Texas Tech team is being underappreciated by the AP voters, and I suspect that will change in the not too distant future. Oregon, 21st in our rankings, not ranked by the AP voters. I think they only picked up 14 votes too, so weren't getting a ton of love yet. We'll see if they're able to kind of capitalize on what looks like a strong start to the season, but health remains an issue for this team, and some of those sophomores need to take that leap. And we haven't quite seen it yet from Mookie Cook or KJ Evans and Jackson Shellstad. We'll see what that looks like. And then Illinois, we had them 23rd. I think they were the most receiving votes. I think Texas Tech and Illinois were the most receiving votes that weren't in the top 25. So again, not a big difference between where we have Illinois and where the AP voters do, but we'll see if that defense can hold up. But the offense looks as advertised for Brad Underwood's team. We talked a bit about Rutgers. Ace Bailey did not suit up for the Scarlet Knights on Monday, and they nearly got peacocked by St. Peter's. We're going to talk about that and some other results from Monday's slate. But first, get ready to tackle the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Well, we already talked about the game line, 6.5-point spreads favoring Kansas and Duke in the Champions Classic matchups, but there are other fun lines on FanDuel. If you don't want to just bet on the spread, you can bet on the over-under for Cooper Flagg combined points and rebounds. That is set at 24.5 right now. So if you think he's going to get more points and rebounds total than that, you can bet on FanDuel. Lamont Butler over under 7.5 points. Was a little surprised to see Lamont Butler specific player props on FanDuel, but that's what makes it so fun, right? So if you want to take those odds, any of the other odds, or even just any of the other matchups going on Tuesday, it's not just the Champions Classic. There's some other good games as well. Just head to FanDuel.com to join today. And as a reminder, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast. We talked about the Champions Classic going on tonight, the 2 fun matchups, Michigan State and Kansas, and Duke and Kentucky. We also talked about the AP poll, the risers, the fallers. We talked about the teams that we have a differing opinion on as the Locked On College Basketball composite rankings as compared to the AP poll. Now I want to talk about some of the results we did see on Monday. And I kind of teased earlier that I was recording this during some of the games. Right now, it looks like Purdue is struggling to put away Yale. There's about a little less than 2 minutes left, so we'll see if that game's still going on at the end of the segment, but certainly something to keep an eye on, as potentially Purdue could be going down here to the Yale Bulldogs. Almost forgot their mascot there. But here are the games that we know have finalized. Rutgers, the 24th ranked team in the AP poll, survives a scare from St. Peter's. 75-65 was the final score, but it was much closer than that. Rutgers finally pulled away at the end with some free throws, but this was a 4 or 5 point game, it felt, for majority of the second half. St. Peter's was up at halftime. And again, we mentioned this, no Ace Bailey. He has not played in either of the first 2 games for Rutgers. So the dynamic duo of freshman superstars Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey has just been Dylan Harper up to this point. It remains to be seen exactly when Bailey will play. It sounds like it is precautionary at this point. Their next game is against Monmouth on Friday. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Ace Bailey play in that game, but I kind of thought he was going to play in this one, and he did not. So we'll see what happens there. Dylan Harper, however, he looked great. 24 points, 8 of 17 shooting. Now he was 1 of 6 from 3. That is still an area of his game that needs some work, but that meant he was 7 of 11 on 2-point attempts. He's the first Rutgers freshman with back-to-back 20-point games to begin a career since 2015. So definitely in some rarefied air there for Harper. But same thing we talked about with Rutgers' first game. There's not a lot of supporting cast for this Scarlet Knights program. Lathan Somerville had 14 off the bench. No other Rutgers player had double figures. Dylan Harper, Lathan Somerville, that was it. In their first game, I believe Dylan Harper and Jeremiah Williams were the only two players in double figures. So this is just a team that does not have enough offensive firepower and didn't do particularly great defensively. I mean, they let St. Peter's shoot 37% from 3 in this contest. And frankly, if St. Peter's didn't shoot an abhorrent 7 of 15 from the free throw line, there's a very real chance that they would have been upset here by this Peacocks program. So I'm not super high on Rutgers. I'm excited to see Ace Bailey. I already love what I've seen from Dylan Harper. Those two guys are very good. Not being excited about Rutgers has nothing to do with the two of them, and they will obviously be better when Bailey is back. But I just don't think the rest of this team is good enough for them to make some real noise in the Big Ten. Even if I'm not super high on the Big Ten, I still don't know if I see this team being good enough night in and night out to really make a lot of noise in that conference. The number 2 ranked Crimson Tide of Alabama survived McNeese. 72-64 was the final score there. Again, Will Wade's team just hung around. It just hung around. They never really had a lead. They never really super challenged Alabama. It never felt like the Crimson Tide were in danger of losing, at least not in the second half. But McNeese did not go away. Big shout out to Will Wade's team for hanging with this good Alabama team. Grant Nelson was the star for the Crimson Tide. He had 22 points in this one. 16 of them came in the first half. He had a stretch where he just went absolutely nuclear for like a 5-minute stretch and scored the majority of his points in that period of time. Finished this game 6 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. Had 8 made free throws as well, along with 7 boards and 3 assists. Latrell Wrightsell came off the bench to score 15, 5 made threes for him. But Bama remains undefeated. They beat McNeese, they beat Arkansas State, but neither of those games were super pretty. The depth on this team has been a little shaky. Aiden Holloway was not good in this game, 0 of 6 from the field, 0 of 5 from 3. Again, this team shoots a lot of threes, so you're going to see a lot of lines like that. Jaron Stevenson had just 4 points on 2 of 6 shooting, 2 of 2 on 2s, 0 of 4 from 3. Obviously getting Chris Youngblood back from his injury, the transfer from South Florida, that's going to be a huge, huge return for them. But for a team that felt they had so much depth that they could redshirt Houston Millette, transfer from Pepperdine, who was one of their leading scorers and shot 44% from 3 last year. I get it. You want to save some of those guys for when you run out of, a lot of the guys on this roster right now are going to be out of eligibility after this year. They're going to move on to the NBA. So Millette will have a more clear path to playing time next year, but you can kind of use him right now. It's been a bit of a shaky start for Bama. I'm not sounding the alarms or anything yet, but we'll see what they look like. Again, having Youngblood back is going to be, I think, a huge help for this team. Sincere Parker, 19 points for the Cowboys off the bench. Once he's at full speed for McNeese, I think that's going to help this team hit another stride. But again, to stay competitive with the second-ranked team in the country is a good sign for Will Wade and this Cowboys team going forward. All right, Marquette has pulled away comfortably from Central Michigan, so no need to sound the alarm bells there. Purdue is up 7 right now with about 90 seconds left, so I'm thinking they're going to hang on and pull out a win here over Yale, but woof, it was an ugly one all the way throughout as the pesky Bulldogs team stuck with them. A couple other quick results. Ohio State, we mentioned it earlier, crushed Youngstown State, 81-47. Don't really need to talk about the game too much, but the sophomore duo of Aaron Bradshaw, the Kentucky transfer, and Sean Stewart, the Duke transfer. They didn't do much in Ohio State's first game, and Isaac and I spoke about that. Like, we kind of need them to look better if we have real hopes for this Ohio State team. Well, they look great in this one. Bradshaw had 16 points, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks, 5 of 8 from the field in just 21 minutes of action. Stewart, 10 points, 7 boards and a block, 5 of 6 from the field in just 16 minutes. That's 26 combined points, 15 combined boards, and 10 of 14 shooting for the duo. Yes, Youngstown State is not a strong opponent, but that is still a very good result for those two young kids to have some momentum going forward for Jake Diebler's squad. Florida handled Grambling at home. 86-62 was the final. 5 guys in double figures for the Gators. Ruben Chinyelu, a transfer from Washington State, was their leader, 14 on 7 of 8 shooting for him, along with a pair of blocks and a pair of steals. The Gators only shot 30% from 3, but they had a 21 rebound advantage over Grambling, also had 11 steals, moved to 2-0 on the year for the Gators. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us on that Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. My co-host Isaac Shade and Leaf Tulane will be back with you all on Wednesday to recap the Champions Classic. Then I'll be back with you on Thursday with a fun guest lined up. And then Isaac and I will get you into the weekend on Friday's show. And then next week, we're getting into Feast Week, all the fun festivities going on there. The best part of the year for college basketball. I cannot wait. Thanks again for listening, folks. As always, apologies to the lawyer family, especially as we don't quite get the end result for this game here between Purdue and Yale. Let's go Wildcats. And until next time, peace out.